Hello, viewers. Hello, listeners. Hello, everybody, wherever you are, whatever time of day it is. Welcome to the View for the Grandstand podcast. I am David Lloyd, and joining me at the other end of the Zoom line for this podcast is Gerhard Berger's son, not Gabriel Berger.
Hello. Hi.
How
Hello.
you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. Yeah. Busy week in Formula One, which we're just about
Very
to get
busy.
into. So before we get into it, a bit of background, because of course this is the first episode that we have put out, is that Gabriel and I are in no way, shape, or form experts on Formula One. We are not Martin Brundle. We are not David Coulthard. We are not ex-drivers. We're not ex-mechanics. We have no links to any Formula One teams. We are just two fans who have been watching Formula One since probably as long as we can remember. And yeah, that's kind of all we're here to do, is just talk about things from a fan's perspective. You know, we may well get things wrong, but we're not professionals. We're just doing this for a bit of a laugh. So, on that note, one of the busiest weeks in Formula One history began with the brilliant news that Romain Grosjean recovered from his horrifying crash at the Bahrain Grand Prix, or say recovered, is recovering very well from his crash at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Discharged from hospital in Bahrain on the Tuesday with only burns.
I think he's incredibly lucky to get away with only burns. I know there were discussions of possible broken ribs, various other injuries kind of in the day or two after it. So, for him to come out of the hospital earlier on in the week with only burns, it's a fairly major bandages on his hands, but only burns is nothing short of a miracle, really.
Yeah, it's testament to how safe Formula One is in the modern era, because all of the things that could have happened, the fact of the halo working, doing its job by prizing the barrier open over his head, not into it, which would have killed him, being able to get out of the car quickly, which otherwise would have killed him. Obviously, the FIA are still doing their investigation into the crash, so we won't know the full extent of everything until they have compiled all that and put something out for all of us to discuss, which, with the way the FIA investigate things, you'd imagine will be some point in the middle of next year, once they get all the facts together.
I saw it's expected to take about maybe 6 months, I think. So very probably the middle of next year.
They will leave no stone unturned on this. This is absolutely guaranteed. They are not going to say, oh, it was due to this. I mean, we know why. We all saw the reason why the crash was caused. We're not going to lay a portion on any blame on any driver, but we all saw where the crash came from. None of us expected what happened to happen, and the fact that he got out with only burns and some slight, some soft tissue damage, soft tissue damage on his left ankle. Nothing short of amazing. Obviously, he missed the Sakhir Grand Prix and will miss the upcoming Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Pietro Fittipaldi filled in Sakhir, and we'll talk about how he got on later on. And we were kind of hoping that would be the only bit of F1 driver news for the Sakhir Grand Prix.
How wrong we were. It was
so
much more.
It was quite something. On the Tuesday morning, just after 7 o'clock, I was on my way to work, and my phone bonged. It was a notification from BBC Sport saying Lewis Hamilton tests positive for COVID-19 and will miss the Sakhir Grand Prix. That started 24 hours of absolute mayhem in the Formula One world.
It was chaos. It was exciting chaos, but chaos.
And there were rumours flying around. Some people were saying, oh, Stoffel Van Dorn's got the seat. Some people were saying Esteban Gutierrez has got the seat. Some people were saying George Russell's going to get the seat. No one really knew who was going to get the seat.
Some people were throwing Hulkenberg's name in a lot as well.
Hulkenberg was coming back in.
He's got no ties to Mercedes.
Yeah. Literally, I mean, it was a miracle that I didn't start linking Kazuki Nakajima or someone. The way names are coming out, you're just kind of expecting anybody to be linked with it.
An early return from Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Jensen Button.
Jensen Button added some very weak fuel to the fire. Slightly unfortunate phrase given the circumstances we've just talked about, but by joking that he would be returning to Mercedes, and of course we all knew that wasn't going to happen. But then it became very clear that it was a two-person battle between George Russell and Stoffel Van Dorn. Stoffel Van Dorn obviously due to fly out to Bahrain after the Formula E test at the Ricardo Tormo circuit in Valencia, and George Russell already in Bahrain, having raced for Williams the weekend before.
I think Stoffel got quite unlucky in this regard. Really, had the news about Hamilton's test, broken on the Wednesday or the Thursday, it would have been a bit harder to get George out of his Williams contract, and it would have been Van Dorn's seat. Obviously, because it happened on the Tuesday, they would have gone into talks with Williams pretty much immediately. And so it just gave them that extra bit of time they needed to get Russell into the Mercedes seat. So you kind of feel sorry for Van Dorn, given that he's their official reserve driver. But at the same time, Russell's the one they're really kind of working on at the moment.
And as Gabriel said, George Russell was then confirmed on Wednesday morning as departing Williams, at least for the Sakhir Grand Prix. Still no word on if he's going to drive in Abu Dhabi yet for Mercedes.
I know what I want.
I know what I want as well. It's probably the same thing. But no word on whether George Russell will be in Abu Dhabi. But he was in for Merck for Sakhir, which obviously, as Gabriel said, sad for Stoff because 24 hours later, that was probably his seat. But there wasn't much else that could really be done. You can tell that Toto Wolff especially really sees George Russell as the future.
Yes, definitely.
Like whether that is next season, where they pay Valtteri off, loan him to Williams, loan him to wherever, give him something, or Lewis decides, actually, no, I don't want to do any more Formula One. I'm going to go now whilst I'm on top. Then they would just bring George in. They're looking, if not for 21, definitely for 22.
Yes, yeah. I think if he's not in that Mercedes seat in 2022, at the latest, I'll be very surprised.
It would mean that someone would have had to come with a better offer.
Yeah.
Really, because there's no way that Mercedes are going to want to let George go that easily.
Not at all.
Especially as they've only got Valtteri on a 1-year extension, which is 2021. And obviously everyone's saying, oh, but Valtteri's got contract for 21. So did Sergio Perez. Look what happened. So does Alex Albon.
Look how that one went. Look how that may go.
Might be going. Exactly. Of course, after George Russell was confirmed as leaving Williams for at least a week, going to Mercedes, Williams then confirmed out 5 minutes later that Jack Aitken, their reserve driver and Formula 2 driver for Campos, will be stepping up to Formula 1, at least for Sakhir. Again, possibly for Bahrain, depending on what happens
where George
this
is.
week. And we kind of come back to Haas on the driver market, because just when you thought it was all done, Haas finally confirmed the worst-kept secret in Formula 1, probably at the worst time. Probably the only team I can think of worst timing was when Midland announced they were going to be Spiker the same day Michael Schumacher announced his retirement in 2006.
Yeah, they put this one right as we were all speculating about who's going to go to Mercedes. He's scrolled past kind of a whole load of driver announcements, get briefly excited, and then sees Mazepin, which we all expected.
Yeah, and Schumacher, which we all also expected.
We all also expected.
It was the Alan Partridge shrug gif. What am I meant to do about it? Like, we knew that it was we knew basically from Mugello that it was going to be them two.
Probably the one thing less surprising in the series was, this season, was Stroll staying at Aston Martin Racing Point.
I mean, we knew that was going to happen anyway.
I didn't even register the announcement when it happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's a true story, people listening.
When
I told Gabriel that Stroll had already signed a contract, I was like, when was that? It was around Silverstone.
I only realised this week.
because it's one of those that you just kind of know is going to happen. Obviously, we will get back to Nikita Mazepin in a second when we get to sort of talk about the first half of this week and looking forward to Abu Dhabi as to what's going to happen there. A lot has happened in the world of Nikita Mazepin and the Haas F1 team in the last week. Also, Max Verstappen did his latest episode of I'm Going to Talk Without Engaging Brain. Luckily, this time it wasn't too bad because he only decided to describe the outer loop at Sakhir, which they were using for the Sakhir Grand Prix, as not a racetrack. I mean, it's not exactly like we're asking them to drive on Baby Park here. Like, this isn't Mario Kart. This is...
No, not quite.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like watching a race at Baby Park, but...
It was enjoyable.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's definitely a racetrack.
The straights at Baby Park aren't long enough for DRS.
Yeah, the turns are a bit too long as well.
Yeah, no overtaking can be done.
It would just be a DRS train round it. Well, that's what everyone was saying going into this weekend.
It wasn't.
It wasn't. Like we said, we will talk about that again in a second. But final piece of news, and just to prove out, I mean, we've done this at rocket speed, but this is all last week's news, is that the Young Drivers Test, some more drivers were confirmed for the Young Drivers Test. May I just emphasize this? Young Drivers Test. Renault announced that a certain young man called Fernando Alonso.
He sounds promising.
He's I'm not sure where I've heard of him before.
I think he did some IndyCar, but didn't get very far.
Yeah. Did he work for like some guys called Mac and Lauren or something? I don't know. Sebastian Buemi. He's very young. Is going to be driving for Red Bull in the Young Drivers Test. And Robert Kubica. Very young driver.
Never heard of him either.
No, I don't know what happened to him. It's not like he was racing in Formula One last season or anything. We'll be in at Alfa Romeo. So, and that follows up with previous announcements about Yuki Tsunoda and Marino Sato at AlphaTauri, who are young drivers, and Ferrari basically putting most of their academy in at Ferrari, Haas, or Alfa Romeo, including Antonio Fuoco, Robert Schwartzman, and Callum Ilott, who will all be at one of the Ferrari-powered teams, which I can't remember. I put a post on the Instagram, View for the Grandstand pod on Instagram. Please give us a follow. On Twitter, we are View Grandstand, and we are also on Facebook at View for the Grandstand pod. Drop us a like, drop us a follow. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, if wherever it is, down there somewhere, if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on SoundCloud, the subscribe link, I think, is up there. You can't see it. It's above you or below you. I can't remember how SoundCloud works, depending on what you're listening on. And now we get into the beef of it, which was the Sakhir Grand Prix.
Yes.
Now, Max Verstappen described it as not a track, but it was a track, and it was a very tight and very fast track.
Yes. I think, the speeds were obviously much higher than last week, especially down the penultimate straight. They were coming at it at a much higher speed than they were. So whilst on the surface of it, the last corner and the first few were very similar due to the much higher speeds they carried in some of them and the general lower downforce they're running, it might as well have been a different track to what we had the week before.
Yeah, and I remember I saw a video, I think it was Tim McMurdoch did a video previewing the Sakhir, as he does every week, previewing the new track. He had a low downforce setup on, and he said turn 2 and 3, which normally are a nothing from on F1 cars, were all of a sudden really difficult corners.
Well, we saw on the very first lap, I think Kimi went round all on his own.
Yeah,
so
which clearly, I think gave us a bit of a flashback. Because,
bit of a scare. You see the cameras we saw across the back.
Smoke across the back of a car spearing towards the exact same barrier.
Fortunately, he kept on the track and went all the way around and carried on.
Yes, and wasn't last by the end of the first lap, which was something we will get on
impressive. It was a brief heart-in-mouth moment.
And of course, the main story of the weekend, George Russell, first appearance for Williams, probably the highest profile job interview anyone has ever had.
Yes. Definitely. Replacing the 7-time world champion.
All things considered, though, very impressive. He had the measure of Valtteri Bottas in Friday's practice sessions. Again, Saturday...
It's a fraction off him.
Fraction off. Qualifying only 200ths off. Like
that was close as you can be.
Your first qualifying session in a car that you don't actually fit against a guy who's been in that car, well, not the same car, but has been in that team for 4 years and has been involved in the design and manufacture of 3 cars. Surely you look at that and you think, if not 2021, then 22, George Russell is going to be a Mercedes driver soon enough.
Well, they have to,
that was just
because,
on qualifying.
Yeah. If he doesn't get that, then he's just kind of sat around wasted in F1.
Well, yeah, exactly. And we've seen it with some other drivers before, like Mr. Perez.
Yes, yeah. And we're still seeing it with him, even despite the weekend result.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, although the headlines were on George Russell, there were 19 other drivers involved in this race. So we should talk about a few of them. most notably, Q3 appearances, both AlphaTauris in Q3, which has become very kind of, it's almost to be expected now, which 12 months ago we wouldn't have thought of for Toro Rosso.
They definitely stepped up, especially since they've started phasing to more of a sister team than a B team. They have definitely kind of picked up a little bit more and become closer to the top of the midfield.
Definitely, and there for when the luck strikes, as we saw in Monza, of course. But surprisingly, although obviously everyone's been talking about Pierre Gasly this, Pierre Gasly that, Pierre Gasly the other, Danny Kvyat, what a Q3 that was.
He did an excellent job. Yeah. So both drivers clearly doing a good job of it. Yeah. Kvyat's probably another one we might not see next year, though.
Which feels like an absolute shame because he's not exactly done anything wrong this year.
No, not at all.
Like, if anything, the damage really done to his career was the way that
2016
Red Bull chewed him up and spat him out a race after he just got a podium.
And he's kind of been stuck in the Red Bull system since then.
Which is surprising, apart from his year at Ferrari, when he was simulating as a reserve driver. He's been at Red Bull, which it's a bit like, I don't know, it feels like maybe like getting back with a really toxic ex. Possibly. But it probably wasn't the best thing for him to do, to go back into the Red Bull system.
Well, an F1 drive, an F1 drive.
Yeah. I mean, he's not the only one. Brendan Hartley did it, and that didn't go very well.
No.
So, he's not the only one to have tried going back into the Red Bull system. And Sebastian Buemi is doing it right now.
He's been in it longer than pretty much anyone else at the moment, though.
Yeah, and normally, if you've been in a system for that long, you would expect on paper that he would be driving the lead Red Bull if you've been in the system that long.
Well, he was for a bit, and I think he's lucky that Ricciardo left for Renault a couple of years ago because otherwise they would have had enough drivers without him.
Yeah, exactly. That was the lucky break that got him in. But then you could easily imagine that if Kimi Räikkönen had retired earlier, he might have ended up at Alfa Romeo.
Yes, that's a possibility.
Giovinazzi. But even then, I mean, Kvyat is a good driver. He in 2014 he outperformed Jean-Eric Vergne pretty much every week. 2015 he outscored Daniel Ricciardo. Everyone forgets this.
It's easy to forget, but yeah, he did.
It's easy to forget because 2015 was such a forgettable year for Red Bull relative to what they'd just come off the back of.
I don't remember much of any 2015, to be honest.
No, it wasn't the most memorable season apart from the front two. But Kvyat should really be in Formula One next year. He isn't, but he got the AlphaTauri to P6. Gasly ended up P8, P10. I should know this.
Something like that, yeah.
I can't remember. I should know this. Something that will become quite clear over the rest of the time this podcast is happening, viewers and listeners. I'm a very big Pierre Gasly fan, so you will learn more about how I should know more about Pierre Gasly in the coming episodes. Speaking of people from France and the surrounding areas, Charles Leclerc. P4 in a Ferrari in qualifying.
I'm not quite sure how I managed to do that. Clearly, someone snapped the last year's definitely not illegal engine into the back of the car.
But somehow only into Leclerc's car because Vettel doesn't deserve any luck this year, apparently.
Yeah, it wasn't really his weekend.
No, well, it's not really been Vettel's season, apart from the podium in Turkey. It's not really been...
No, it's just, he's probably glad to be leaving.
Yeah, probably. And, of course, he's going to now what is a race-winning team.
Yes.
Which I think we're all very happy to see. So, on to the race. And so Gabriel mentioned what happened out of turn 3. But the crucial part of the race, really, turn 4. Charles Leclerc misses his braking point, takes out Sergio Perez, and Max Verstappen crashes in sympathy.
Yes, well, I
pretty much what happened.
Yeah, I think some point, I can't remember who pointed it out, but the gravel that Verstappen ended up getting stuck on that put him in the wall is very similar colour to the asphalt.
Yes, I think Matt Gallagher mentioned that in the
that was probably it. So it's if he's not looking and in the heat of the moment, he might have steered towards it. To be honest, it looks like he's just avoiding Perez more than anything else.
Yeah, and just misjudges it
in the wall.
Sort of, initially, when you saw that Verstappen was out, you're just like, did Leclerc take him out as well? Was it like 200-mile-an-hour bowling ball? No, just turned out that Max just misjudged the runoff area.
Yeah, and the spinning pink thing.
Yes,
but I think if that hadn't happened, that could have been Max's race to lose.
Then that's the thing, is that it could have been Max's race to lose. But on that note of Red Bull, if Max Verstappen isn't there, then he wasn't. But the second Red Bull, as it should be up there, should have been up there.
And wasn't really.
Alex Albon was nowhere near it.
I don't even remember where he finished.
P6.
Too far down.
P12.
Yeah. Well, decent gain.
Bearing in mind, I mean, yeah, it's a decent gain if you're driving an AlphaTauri, but if you're driving a Red Bull, you should not be starting P12. You should be at least P4 at the moment, especially with Ferrari being off it. And although Racing Point are getting there, Renault are getting there, McLaren are getting there, improving every week, like they're still not breaking into the top 4.
Well, it's been said before, and we said again. Red Bull need 2 drivers at the moment. They've got Verstappen, and then they've got Albon separately, and he just can't really be there to help Verstappen when he needs it and to back up the team when Verstappen's not there.
Yeah, and as a result, Red Bull missed out on what
could
have been
at least
what could have been a really, admittedly lucky, but important win in terms of their own morale, because they've been nailed on for second in the constructors ever since testing.
Yeah,
and it's a shame for Alex Albon because we know he's a good driver. You don't come third in Formula 2 for, well, actually, sometimes you do come third in Formula 2 for being a complete mug, but like 9 times out of 10, you don't come in the top 3 places in Formula 2, especially for being useless.
No, not at all.
Definitely wasn't throwing shade at Nikita Mazepin there, by the way. But, you don't come in the top 3, especially, I mean, that was a field that had Lando Norris, had George Russell.
It was a very, very strong F2 field.
It had Nicholas Latifi and Nick de Vries in it as well, I seem to remember.
Yes, yeah.
It had, drivers who since went on to be at the top of Formula 2 at various points. So it's not exactly, I know Formula 2's very different to Formula 1 in pretty much every sense, but those who are the best do rise to the top.
Yeah.
And for Albon to have been in the top 3 proves that he clearly is a good driver. Yeah, it took
it took some F2 wins, I think, one in Baku, was it? And maybe Silverstone?
Yes.
So
very important and very impressive wins.
It deserves to be there. It's just Red Bull hasn't worked out for him.
Yeah, and like people say, it's the car or the team are giving Max preferential treatment. Every team builds their car to their best driver.
Yeah.
The driver they see as number 1 is who they build the car to. Mercedes really build their car around Hamilton. Ferrari have been building their car around Leclerc this year because he is their future. Red
Building
Bull,
a questionable term.
Well, attempting. Ferrari master plan strikes again. But Red Bull obviously were building their car around Max Verstappen, but they do forget that there is a second driver there.
Yes.
And whereas since Daniel Ricciardo left, they have forgotten there is a second driver there.
And you look at teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, and whilst they have built their car around their lead driver, it's still suited the other one enough that they can race it. Just hasn't suited. It didn't suit Gasly in 2018. It hasn't suited Albon so far.
Yeah, and everyone said, could it just be that Gasly's not quite as good as we think?
He won a race this year in an AlphaTauri.
He won a race in a car that should be nowhere near winning a race, especially at Monza.
Yes, yeah.
Like, if it was something like Monaco and it was raining and it was just a repeat of Panis in 96...
then you can believe it.
You understand it. But yeah, exactly. But it's Monza. It's not a Honda circuit. It's a circuit that Mercedes was so far ahead of everyone that weekend that it had to take a monumental balls up for them to not win.
Well, and the Renault engine was fairly competitive as well.
That's true.
Because we saw
was gaining at the end of that.
And we'd seen the week before in Spa that the Renaults had decent straight line speed in first, second sectors.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, and then, you get to the track like the outer loop at Bahrain, and it's basically
Mercedes first.
It's a modern version of Monza, really, in terms of setup and in terms of the narrowness and the bumpiness of that sector, the chicane, the corner into a braking zone, into a chicane, into and that was a difficult braking zone. It was catching out drivers in Formula 2 qualifying all weekend.
It did look tricky. There's a way, especially they get kind of halfway across the curb. Yeah, if you catch a bump wrong that way, you're going to miss the corner quite
Formula
fast.
2 drivers were catching it right. Felipe Drugovich nearly lost it in qualifying. Ilott lost it in practice. It was very bumpy. George Russell obviously did that overtake on Valtteri Bottas after the safety car.
That was quite something.
It was an impressive move. However, on the note of Mercedes, that pit stop.
Yes.
That pit stop.
Went wrong.
It was unfortunate because George was commanding it. George took the lead turn 1, didn't look back ever since, managed a safety car restart brilliantly, got a bit unlucky with a virtual safety car, and not so much in terms of timing, but in terms of Valtteri gained some time because George hit some traffic and got the restart like in the middle, just in the braking zone for a corner. Whereas Valtteri was midway down the straight. So Valtteri got a bit of a gain from that, a few seconds. Jack Aitken, who mentioned at the start of the pod, making his debut for Williams, misjudged the exit of turn 11 or 10 or 11.
Yeah, got lucky with that one, really.
Got lucky not to properly bin it.
It's almost like Albon did in I think free practice before Bahrain.
Yeah, it was pretty much carbon copy of the accident.
So to get away with just a front wing falling off is, pretty lucky for his first race.
Pretty lucky, and of course they put out yellow flags there. They had to put a safety car to get marshals on the track. Mercedes decide, we're going to call both cars in. They didn't. Toto Wolff said that they had to do it. No, they didn't.
No.
Their tyres were going to go to the end.
I think they were probably worried about threats from behind if people did pit, but they don't need to be.
I think they understandably. I mean, Perez had pitted after his biff with Leclerc and had got back up to third before the safety car. And they were worried because obviously Perez had already done his mandatory stop.
Yeah, and was gaining quite fast on pretty much everyone else.
Gaining still because Perez does manage his tyres very well. But Mercedes did not need to make that pit stop.
No, and before the safety car, they had plenty of time, so they would have been able to pull that before Perez got past the two ahead of him.
Yeah. And of course, normally in that situation, Mercedes have double stacked under a safety car before, and
they've done it very well. 9
times out of 10, they have done it perfectly. Hit their marks, hit everything perfectly. Sunday was that one time.
Didn't work. I believe there was from what I saw, there was a radio error between the pit wall and 2 garages, and Russell's side didn't pick up on the tyre call, which meant that Russell was fitted with the wrong tyres.
Yeah.
Which caused major problems.
Yeah. And of course, then that meant that George did a lap on the wrong tyres. Valtteri had his old tyres put back on.
Yes.
Lasted to the end, but did send him tumbling down the order.
Mm. So now I suppose you can see why they changed
the tyres. If anyone needed the stop, it was Valtteri.
Yes.
But at the time, they were sort of, did they need to make the stop at that point? Probably not, because those tyres that they were on were absolutely fine. But with the safety car coming out, there was no point extending because they had to have fought their way back up, or just hoped that Perez would leave them alone. It
was just a bit messy, really, from Mercedes at that point.
Normally a well-joined organisation, but they just had an off day, and they obviously will learn from it. Toto Wolff was very critical of what happened on Sky Sports. He can't repeat what he said. In fact, he got told off by Simon Lazenby for it, but it was true. It was unfortunate, but that did let Sergio Perez back into the lead.
It did, and to be honest, for a bit after the safety car, it looked like George was going to take that back again.
It was.
And then suddenly the radio came over telling me he had a puncture, and I died a bit.
I think we all did, because collectively we'd gone from, when George took the lead at turn 1, I was watching with my parents, and we were always going, George! And then towards the end, I was just... I couldn't... Yeah, I haven't cried over Formula 1 for a long time, but I was close. Close, because George, that would have been a dream win. It would have been sort of Verstappen 2016 Spain levels of dream win, but much more.
Yeah.
Because it's George. It's someone who I actually like. I hope Max Verstappen isn't listening, by the way. You're a good driver, you just need to engage brains sometimes. If you're listening, which you're probably not.
It just appears through your door.
Yeah, it just appears right
flies
through your door right there. Yeah, angry Max. Bad Max. But Sergio Perez, 190 race starts.
Yeah, the most that any driver's had before winning a race.
Finally gets a win. Now, I will admit, I was still kind of caught up in the emotion of George's race not going his way to really appreciate it. It was only really Monday morning that I was like, actually, Perez winning is, if anything, more important.
I think it's better because it shows kind of at a crucial moment to all the other teams what he can do. And George, whilst it would have been nice to see him win, he showed what he can do to the people who it matters.
Yes.
And so in the end, it all worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and I think that is true, is that George Russell definitely passed the interview. Had a very good job interview. You know, whether he gets the job, I mean, might get the job for the weekend. We still don't know. Whether he gets the job for next year, a bit messy with the contract situation. Needs a few things to fall into place for that. 2022, surely he has the best negotiating hand out of all three of them. Out of Hamilton, Bottas, and Russell, he's the best option at the best price.
Well, yeah, I've seen lots of people saying that, they'll kick Hamilton out because Russell can do the same thing for a lower price. I don't think that's the case. There was an interview with one of the press interviews with Verstappen earlier in the week where I think they were asked, if Hamilton's a 7-time world champion and someone else can come in and do the same job for a lower price, why should they have Hamilton? There was a brief silence, and Max just said, "Well, it's because he's a 7-time world champion. He's got all the experience to be a good driver beyond just being fast on track." That's one of the times where actually, he was quite clever when he opened his mouth.
Yes.
So he made a very good point there.
He did. To be fair, I'd like fair play to Max because I mean, he speaks the truth.
Yeah.
There's a reason, like George Russell, had the measure of Bottas for most of the race, but I mean, the gap was only about at peak. It was about 8 to 10 seconds.
Well, considering the nature of the track, that's a good kind of 20, 25 seconds around any other circuit.
Yeah, and obviously factor in that, like at Portimao, Hamilton finished 30 seconds ahead of Bottas, and that was after a chaotic race as well, chaotic race start at least as well.
We see, I think, in for the Bahrain Grand Prix, the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen was a fairly steady 4 seconds for pretty much all of it until Verstappen's botched pit stop.
Yeah. I mean, George had the measure. Yeah, maybe not to the headline figures that Lewis often has the measure of Valtteri, but still had the measure. And for a driver who's, how old's George? 22, 23?
22.
So, yeah, it's somewhere between our
He's younger than you.
Yeah, it might well be. Which makes me feel really bad because I wanted that. I wanted to be that driver when I was younger.
Oh, I still do.
Yeah. I'm too big in pretty much every proportion to fit in the cars these days.
So was George.
Well, he's not got the horizontal issue.
He was far too tall. His feet were too big.
Yeah, I have that issue, but I also have the flabber. I don't have the fitness to drive a Formula 1 car. Maybe a touring car, but not a Formula 1 car. But yeah, Sergio Perez, not only did he deserve that win and has he deserved that win for a long time, played himself right into contention for that Red Bull drive we were just talking about.
Yes, yeah, I think, if there was ever a time for him to really show when he could have that seat, it was today, or the other day, sorry, and it came after, earlier in the week, which you haven't really mentioned because it ended up happening just after we finished one of our tests last week, but his very strange press conference.
Yeah, I don't even know if that was a press conference. What was it?
It wasn't. I think people asked questions. I don't really know. He just kind of, showed up on Zoom very hesitantly, showed an opening reel twice because he couldn't work out how to get it going.
And we heard it about another 5 times in the background.
And then started yammering away in Spanish.
So I didn't really follow it. Speak, so
I gave up and went and had dinner, I think.
Yeah, I think I did the same thing.
And it didn't really come to much. It basically said, unless I get a Red Bull seat, I'll take a year out. And that was kind of it. But yeah, I think his win really shows he's probably at the peak of his career right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And a Red Bull seat is the kind of, maybe not the sensible, that's probably not the best word, but the most obvious route at the moment, if he can get it.
Obviously might not be the only option. We'll get to that in a second. But definitely the best option. And I think it's would be good for all parties other than Alex Albon because...
Absolutely.
Because Verstappen would get a rear gunner who can actually drive I mean, Perez has driven some terrible cars. You know,
Yes.
I mean, the Sauber that he nearly beat Alonso in was nowhere near being a race winner in Malaysia in 2012. And
no, not at all.
He nearly won it through his own sort of misjudgment of a patch of water on the track.
I watched that again this morning.
Yeah, it was only about 5 laps through the end as well, which was even more. It was gaining,
and he was catching,
gaining.
He was catching.
And then, of course, had the misjudgment. He went to McLaren at really the wrong time.
It wasn't a great year for him.
Wasn't a great move. Partly because the car was terrible.
Yeah,
and partly because I think there was a culture at McLaren that he just didn't fit into.
No, it wasn't.
Sauber,
it just didn't suit him.
Basically, Sauber was a party at the time,
yes.
and he went from that to a McLaren
Ron
that was just being retaken back by Ron Dennis.
Yeah, and it was very
who famously has a man to wash his gravel in his driveway. Like only Ron Dennis has someone who washes his gravel. Like, you know,
and I believe, you know, he insists every room is kept at exactly 21 degrees as well.
And he has someone to like dust the floor in the or used to have someone to dust the floor in the MTC.
Probably.
Like, and once got mad at Adrian Newey for daring to add some colour to his office. You know, there's a culture clash. Went to Force India as it was at the time, and again, that was more up Checo's street with the atmosphere there. So there's no denying that atmosphere-wise, Red Bull would be perfect.
It would suit him.
He also opens doors for Red Bull in terms of the South American market, the Central American market.
Yes, yeah.
Because of the Mexican driver that speaks Spanish could also not only get Mexico, Argentina, Chile, the Spanish-speaking countries and most of Latin America, he could probably also get parts of Europe, like Spain, which they don't really have as much of an appearance in.
Well, we'll see Fernando Alonso next year.
True, but for Red Bull, that would still be useful to have.
Good point.
Perez as a. I mean, yeah, he's not Fernando Alonso, he's not Carlos Sainz Jr., but he is still a Spanish-speaking driver, which for Red Bull is as good as anything to have. Because we've seen that Red Bull with Verstappen have got a monopoly over
a massive Dutch fan space.
Not just monopoly over fans, but also business-wise, been able to benefit. And also, it could be good for the AlphaTauri fashion brand as well, because they could branch into Latin America. And obviously, they're like AlphaTauri benefited from Gasly's win in Monza, but they will also benefit if Red Bull sign Perez. Because they can then start selling to Latin America. So for Red Bull as a company, it works. For Red Bull, the team, it works as well, because like we said, Perez can drive some terrible cars, or cars that aren't suited to him, and still get podiums and still, you know, be with Verstappen, hopefully.
Yeah, as you said, the only person it doesn't work for is Alex Albon.
Yeah. And, you know, like we said, there could be another option opening further down the grid.
Very possibly.
We'll talk about.
We'll get to that
in a second, because as well as it being the Sakhir Grand Prix, I know we kind of rushed through that, but there is a lot to talk about this week. So we are going to sort of gather through as much as we can, as much as possible. Formula 2 had its conclusion at the same weekend of the Sakhir Grand Prix, which finished with Mick Schumacher, son of Michael. He is never going to be able to live that tag down, winning something that Michael never did. Michael never won Formula 3000 as it was at the time. But Mick has won Formula 2. Congratulations to Mick and to the Prema team, who won the Teams Championship as well.
Yes.
And I think the problem with Mick Schumacher winning, I say problem, it makes it sound like I'm going to say something really controversial here. It's not even a problem. It's just the annoying thing is it takes away from the fact that Yuki Tsunoda had the best weekend anyone has had in Formula 2 this season.
Yes.
He got, I think it was a double podium finish in the end. Got a win in the feature, podium in the sprint.
Well, he's now really kind of making his point, and has been doing so for quite a while now, making his case for that AlphaTauri seat alongside Gasly next year.
He went in as an F2 rookie, finished fourth in the standings behind Schumacher, Callum Ilott and Mazepin, which was sad for Tsunoda that he didn't get the top three, because that would obviously guarantee the super license points for him to be in Formula 1.
Yes, I think that's why
with his Formula 3 finish last year and being fourth in Formula 2, I think he might still get over the line.
I think that's why they're holding off on any official announcement. It's because they're just waiting for that super license to come through.
Yeah, whereas at least with Schumacher and Mazepin, it was almost nailed on that they were both going to be in the top three. In fact, Schumacher was confirmed as being in the top three, and Mazepin pretty much was there, barring any.
Yes.
And even then, I think he's still got points because he's done a couple of seasons in Formula 2, and I think obviously did some junior Formula as well, which will mean that he gets over the line just through being around the junior Formula for a bit longer. But Yuki Tsunoda, great driving. Jan de Ruvela won the sprint race as well, so double win for Carlin, which was big for them. Who have just signed Dan Tickton.
Yeah, another year in F2.
Another year in F2. Well, it's only going to be his second year for Will
Buxton's
favourite driver.
I keep forgetting that he hasn't done a year previously, and it was F3 he got punted from.
Yeah, because he was with the Red Bull Junior program. Now he's gone to Carlin, who have links with Red Bull.
Yeah, so maybe he's back in the program.
Maybe Red Bull got desperate and have done to Tickton what they've done to Buemi, Hartley, and Kvyat in the past, but just a bit lower down, and Albon as well.
Yes.
So, of course, Formula 2 next season. Some drivers have been confirmed. You've got Felipe Drugovich going to Univirtuosi, taking over Callum Ilot's seat. You've got, obviously, like I said, Dan Tickton going to Carlin, taking Tsunoda's seat. Callum Ilot's an interesting one because he came second in Formula 2.
Has no F1 seat.
Terrible end to the season with the 2 Bahrain races. None of those weekends really went his way. Has no F1 drive. Was testing in Bahrain with Charouz, who had Louis Delatraz and Pedro Piquet driving for them this year. But just when we thought Formula 1 couldn't have any more news,
this morning it all kicked off again.
It's all kicked off again. So Nikita Mazepin, who a lot of people don't like for various reasons. Some because he's a pay driver, but we can debunk that one because
we just like Lance Stroll because he was a pay driver.
People just like Lance Stroll because he's a pay driver, but he's got podiums.
They've both done well.
Perez, pay driver, did well. Niki Lauda was a pay driver once. We don't complain about him.
Not in the slightest.
But, as much as you bash pay drivers, whatever you want, that's not the point. The point is, Mazepin famously has a very interesting, shall we say, sense of humour.
Yes, hasn't worked for him this morning today.
He has a history of saying some weird things. In fact, he once commented on a George Russell live stream or thing, saying like, "I have a piece of news for you that might be a coming out."
That was
George Russell was gay, which
a couple of months ago.
It's a few months old, but still hasn't quite fully left my head. But today, this morning, UK time, Nikita Mazepin posted a video on an Instagram story of him deciding that groping a woman's chest was a good idea.
Taken down very quickly, but obviously caught the attention of pretty much the entire F1 community who already had fairly strong dislikes against him to unite even more against making him an F1 driver.
It's one of the few things. There was a meme that I sent Gabriel just before we went on, which was like Hamilton haters, Ocon haters, Stroll haters, Verstappen haters, Grosjean, whoever haters. Everyone all pointing towards, it's the ones with the swords all pointing into the middle where it's like Mazepin haters. Everyone. Whoever you like or don't like, you don't like Nikita Mazepin.
Yep.
Which obviously, there's so many levels of what to dissect from this, because Mazepin has, he also the other day or the other week said like, "Happy first birthday, COVID-19." You're like, really? You really doing this right now, Nikita? He's got an interesting sense of humor, interesting decision making. Off track, on track, he can be good.
He's had his issues. He had issues in Spa with Tsunoda.
When he decided that he'd overtake Tsunoda whilst pushing him off the track.
Yeah.
Then was so unhappy with not getting the podium that he nearly knocked Tsunoda over with the P2 board.
The board, yes.
Which had shades of Vettel Canada 19.
Almost. I think Vettel was a little
more dramatic and a bit more childish.
Yes.
But Haas had to cobble together a statement really quickly, which they ended up rushing on an Instagram story. Welcome to 2020, where we put official statements up on Instagram, not on the company website. But surely that means that Haas will be getting rid of Nikita Mazepin almost as quickly as he arrived.
You'd hope to think so. There isn't really any way that after what he's, what he did this morning, there isn't any way that they can keep him on and not face a vast amount of criticism. So the next question is, presuming they get rid of him fairly quickly, who's going to replace him?
Yeah, and of course, Gabriel and I were just discussing before we came on air about who the options are. And there's only really, if Haas are persistent on young drivers who are cheap, but good, there's probably only really 4 options, because as much as, we'd love to see Nico Hülkenberg, and as much as Sergio Perez could play himself into that.
Well, both briefly had links to Haas before they confirmed.
Exactly.
Nikita
and early this season,
Nick.
I would have said, you take the F2 champion and one of those. Obviously now they're taking the F2 champion.
And someone else.
Then it's but if they are so keen to save a bit of money, which I mean they're already doing by not having Grosjean and Magnussen crash their cars every week. If they want to save him more money, Hulkenberg's going to be very expensive and doesn't really bring anything with him.
No.
And Perez is seemingly at the peak of his powers. He's not.
Perez is going to Red Bull or nowhere, or maybe Mercedes. If they offered, but they wouldn't do that.
He said it's Red Bull or bust for him.
Yeah.
So that rules both of them out. So the other 4 options: Alex Albon, young, might not want to go back to Haas, but might be the best thing for him.
He might decide being in the Red Bull system is not the best thing. Yeah.
Callum Ilott, Formula 2 runner-up, vice champion, as Alex Jakes kept on referring to him as over the weekend. Difficulty with Callum Ilott is he doesn't really bring any money, and a lot of people, including my brother, don't really rate him.
Even though he finished second in F2.
But relative to previous F2 years, this year didn't have the strongest field.
No.
There have been strong years, like the year Charles Leclerc won, the year Pierre Gasly won, although that was still
2018 especially.
Yeah, the year that the other 3 of the Twitch quartet were in it. Even last year we had Latifi and De Vries. They were stronger drivers, really. I mean, we've seen glimpses. Well, Robert Schwartz won the most amount of races this season, but wasn't anywhere near as consistent. Deruval has only really picked up in the last few weeks. Ticktum might do well at Carling because, let's face it, Dams kind of used the fact Latifi came second as an excuse to put their feet off the gas, but also teams like Dams and Campos really struggled with the new tyres this year, which is how Jack Aitken being called up was maybe a bit more of a shock than we were all kind of thinking, because look at the F2 standings, he's absolutely nowhere. But last year he won 3 or 4 F2 races. So, let's see. Albon, Ilott, and then the other 2 already in the Haas system, Pietro Fittipaldi and Louis Delatraz.
Well, Fittipaldi, obviously he's already had a 1 race in the car. It wasn't anything spectacular, but given the fact that he didn't have very long time, didn't have any time really to prepare for it, I think he did a really good job. I don't know where he finished in the end. I think last of the runners, unless Aitken dropped back.
Yeah, he was still towards the back, but maybe what Haas want for a year is someone of that Fittipaldi ilk, someone who isn't going to, cause them any problems, isn't going to say anything wrong in the media, isn't going to smash Gunter Steiner's door, isn't going to crash the car every week. Maybe won't be as strong, but, just for a year, just to help them, because they got royally screwed over with the Rich Energy deal.
Oh, yeah, that did not go that way.
They've not recovered. They have not recovered from that at all. The pandemic hasn't helped. They're in a position where what they need is just 2 drivers who aren't going to break anything.
Something safe. And I think, Schumacher and Fittipaldi will probably fit that. And just, as 2 driver names to have in your team, Schumacher and Fittipaldi is pretty good.
Mick Schumacher brings Richard Mille and Deutsche Vermögensberatung with him, which are, Deutsche Vermögensberatung were with Michael.
Yeah.
Back in the day. So they're with Mick now. Mick brings a lot of sponsors from Germany. Fittipaldi obviously would bring more interest in from Brazil,
South American market again.
Yeah. Yeah. And if he were to end up if Haas somehow magically get a good car or Ferrari build a good engine for them, they could well find themselves actually getting towards scoring points more consistently next season.
Very possibly.
Of course, Louis Delatraz being the other option who we haven't really discussed too much. Middling year in F2. Charoux's really, again, didn't handle the change in the tyre manufacturing particularly well.
No.
I mean, like I said, they weren't the only team. Dams and Campos really struggled as well. But, on the basis of that, Delatraz might not have the license points to it. Although I think, both of Fittipaldi and Delatraz do. Tell a lie, they do have the license points. That's why they're the reserve drivers.
Yes.
They do have the license points, although not really picked up from any kind of headline performances in any series, just years of being consistent within their series. Maybe that's what Haas just need, are drivers who they have a driver like Mick Schumacher who's spectacular, but spectacularly consistent and consistently spectacular. And you have someone like Fittipaldi who just brings it home in one piece.
So I think, well, we'll have to wait and see exactly what they decide to do with Mazepin first, whether it's just
exactly.
some kind of formal apology and a last warning.
We could have just wasted 5 minutes there talking about that, but you never know.
Very possibly.
A few races into next season, we could be having this exact same conversation.
Yes, you never know what else he might say between now and then,
or what he might do. How many cars he might smash. How many doors he might smash. More importantly, as it's Haas,
and exactly who in the Haas system they belong to.
Yeah, well, yeah. If it's good to Steiner, good luck. Swear jar at the ready. But equally, on the note of F1 drivers not engaging brain, Max Verstappen decided to not to engage brain again, and follows the long line. In fact, I saw something on Facebook earlier today which outlined exactly every single time Max Verstappen has said something he didn't have to say. Latest in that line, which includes using very derogatory language about Lance Stroll's driving ability, which, although he had a point of Lance Stroll had a terrible weekend in Portugal, did not need that level of language. Thank you very much.
No.
Today, he said that George Russell was doing the sort of semi-crying in front of camera for the show. Now, Max Verstappen has no position to talk. No. 2 words, Portugal qualifying.
Yep.
That picture of him having a sulk around the back of the garages in Portugal.
They've all had bad days. I think they're all perfectly entitled to go and have a sulk somewhere, and whether they're doing it for a camera or not. I don't think George was. I think that really was his race to win. And it just didn't go his way. And so, sitting down on a piece of grass and holding his head in his hands for a bit is a perfectly normal thing to do in that case.
I mean, trust me, you would do that whether you just lost the Sakhir Grand Prix or whether you'd just crashed out of a kart race at a kart track in Essex. Exact same thing. If you're 8 years old and you've done that at a kart meet, one of your first opportunities to win, or whether you're 22.
That's very specific.
Well, yeah, I didn't, but I wasn't that good. But if you're a kid and let's say your first opportunity in karting, or if you're 21, 22, and that's been your first real opportunity to win a race in Formula One, and you were so close to it twice,
and it was taken away from you without your fault.
Yeah, you are going to have a reaction like that. Max knows exactly, well, not exactly, but he knows similar feelings that he's had races that he should have won and been taken away for whatever reason. He has had that, as much as he won't admit it, he has at various points. Although most of that might have been through his own incompetence or impatience.
Well, we had the start of the year. I think 2018 wasn't really his first half of the season.
Yeah. No, yeah, it took him to Austria to get it
together. Picked up the name Max Verstappen, I think, around that season. Just didn't really work.
Yeah, he did. It's one of those, Max talks about sort of other drivers being immature, and then you look at everything that he's done.
He's done an awful lot of stuff. So
in fact, the drivers he says are immature are younger than him, and yet they're actually more mature than he is.
I think George has been incredibly mature so far.
Yeah.
He stuck in the worst car for 2 years.
George's debut season, he was in a car that was so far off it they might as well have been in Formula 2.
Yeah.
I mean, Max Verstappen, the thing is that Red Bull, he can say what he wants because he is their golden boy.
They won't drop him. He could probably, turn to kind of Nikita Mazepin levels of stupidity, and they probably still managed to keep him on.
Quite possibly. I mean, like Max is a guy who did manage to break all manner of COVID security things earlier in the year and stayed
Very
on his
true.
job. So, yeah, Max will be kept on. Thing is, Max is much more marketable for Red Bull than Nikita Mazepin is for Haas. Like we say, still no news on what. Excuse me, still no news on what happens with Mazepin.
Oh, with any luck, next time we put one of these out, we might know.
Yeah, well, I mean, next time we put one of these out, there might be a whole other news section. I think we've been going for nearly an hour now. Bumper episode of the Grandstand this week. And we finish with Instagram conspiracies.
There have been some Instagram conspiracies.
There have been. It has been a big old week for Instagram conspiracies. Nothing to do with the vaccine, nothing to do with anything to do with the pandemic or Brexit or anything that's happening in the news. It is all to do
with George Russell.
And Valtteri Bottas and Mercedes and bios.
And apparently it all means nothing because Mercedes say it's just a bio. Chill.
Yeah, well, they've got a point. It is just a bio. But we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yes.
So, George Russell has got rid of any mention of being a Williams driver in his bio. Valtteri Bottas has got rid of any mention of him being a Mercedes driver in his bio. These are just on Instagram. On Twitter, they're both of them still have the fact that they're driving. Well, I think George might have taken out Williams because he's been at Mercedes, but Valtteri still mentions Mercedes.
It probably means nothing still then.
It probably means nothing. I mean,
that's what conspiracies are for.
I mean, it's not the first time that the F1, F2 family has had conspiracies. Callum Ilott did something very similar earlier this year, and everyone's like, does that mean Ferrari have dropped him? Does that mean that he's not got a seat? Does this mean that? Whatever.
He's just changed his bio.
Yeah, I mean,
it's exactly what it looks like.
At the end of the day, they'll change their bio. They do what they want. It's up to them. Yeah,
doesn't make a difference.
Their social media. At the end of the day, just wait till the news comes from official channels. You know, Mercedes will put out announcements soon about.
They'll make announcements when they're ready.
Yeah, the announcement for Abu Dhabi will be the next one.
The next couple of days, you'd hope.
Well, they need to get it soon.
Well, they need it by Friday.
Yeah,
Hamilton is still isolating, and Russell is still labelled as a Mercedes driver in press conferences.
Yes, he's still on the list. I think he's on the entry list as a Mercedes driver.
I guess I'll wait and see how Hamilton is and how he tests.
Yeah, because he has to have 4 consecutive negative tests spread over about 4 days, which would be the earliest he could leave Bahrain would be tomorrow at the time of filming, which is Thursday. Thursday is tomorrow as we record. So by Friday, we will know.
Well, I guess we'll have to know, even if they don't get their tests in by Friday, they'll have to put someone in the car for FP1 and FP2. And so at that point, it'll be determined.
Yeah.
Even if he tests negative on Sunday.
As soon as they're done FP2, that's it.
We'll know. Yeah.
Unless we have a situation where it's like what happened with when Pascal Wehrlein dropped out in Australia in 2017 and Giovinazzi got thrown in just before qualifying, or like what happened with Hulkenberg at the Nürburgring or Di Resta in 2017. Unless we get these being thrown into qualifying situations.
Yeah, but we'll have to wait and see what he tests with that, I think, before too much speculation gets done.
Either way, of course, Fittipaldi's still yet to be confirmed for Haas for
Abu Dhabi. That was the other question. It'll be him. Either him or there's a chance they might throw in Schumacher just to see how he does in an F1 car, but I think it's unlikely.
There are pictures of him in his Haas suit, but that might just be promotional.
There's pictures of a Mazepin in his Haas suit, and he's not going to drive this week.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's still loads of things to be filled in. But
in fact, wasn't Schumacher supposed to have done FP1 in the Nürburgring before it all got rained off?
Yes, he was going to do Alpha. Ilott was going to do the Haas running, and it got soaked. But you'd imagine Fittipaldi will be in Haas again, and then we went with Mercedes. But again, if Mercedes are keeping George, then Aitken will stay at Williams for another race. And if anything, Jack Aitken, we talked a bit about Fittipaldi. Jack Aitken, despite his crash, probably played himself into like reminding everyone that A, he's still around, and B, he isn't exactly a slouch.
No, he, for the most part of the weekend, was on pace with Latifi.
So Aitken might well have played himself into some sort of position for 22.
Very possibly.
Depending on what happens. I mean, a week is a long time in Formula One, and I think we've just proved that by talking for almost pretty much an hour.
We've spoken for quite a long time. I'm feeling tired.
It has been a very long day.
It's been a long week.
Yes, it's only
and
Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Gabriel for giving up his Wednesday evening to talk about Formula One.
My laptop's dead. I've got nothing else to do.
Yeah,
I wanted to. We briefly planned not to do this, but I just need something to do at this point.
Yes, it was. Yeah, we were almost like, we're not going to do this, and then we decided,
so bored.
Well, you know what? We're a bit bored. Let's talk about Formula One. So quick recap. Sergio Perez, your winner of the 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix, from Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll. The most awkward
Didn't even talk about Ocon second.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much. We forgot about Esteban Ocon. And if we start, we'll be here for another 20 minutes.
Yes.
But well done, Esteban. Well done, Lance. Well done, Racing Point. First double podium for the team. First double podium since, I think, Spa 98, when they were still Jordan.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I was a few months old when that race happened. So
that was a big race.
It was.
Sort of.
Yes. Again, very lucky circumstances, but you got to be there. That's the lesson.
Exactly.
If to finish first you have to
finish.
That is, as they say in Formula One. On that note, like I say, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. He's been Gabriel Berger. I've been David Lloyd. This has been the View from the Grandstand podcast. We will see you hopefully next week for our review of the 2020 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which probably won't be as long as this one has been.
Certainly not. Could be a bit dull.
Well, now I've said that, who knows? But stay safe, look after each other, look after yourselves, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.